Fantasy football is all about getting an edge and absolutely crushing leagues, winning them pretty easily, so it's a good thing you clicked on this video. It will be the best decision you've made all day. I'll be going over 9 absolute league winners that are a little bit further down the draft boards that not a lot of people are hip to, but they will get you walking to the fantasy playoffs, if not a free championship, because this is good value. If you've been around this channel, you know I absolutely hate wasting people's time. If you get any value at all from this video, feel free to like it, maybe even subscribe if you want to get these videos all year long. But the biggest sleeper, in my opinion, one that I'm really loving this year is Christian Kirk. And if we're keeping it simple, he's the new wide receiver 1 on a team that lost Calvin Ridley and Zay Jones, 2 of the biggest target getters on the Jaguars, and we replaced them with Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. Yeah, they're good wide receivers. I think they have decent promise, but they're definitely downgrades from those 2 guys. And I see how you could get a little bit scared because there's a rookie wide receiver coming into the mix, and a lot of the times rookie wide receivers are pretty hard to gauge and know what we're going to expect from them unless it's a guy like a rookie Jamar Chase or a rookie Marvin Harrison. And then we have Gabe Davis, who's a decent deep threat, but he's going from the second option to Josh Allen to the second option to Trevor Lawrence. He's not really going to be that good. He wasn't amazing behind Stephon Diggs, even when Stephon Diggs wasn't Stephon Diggs in the later half of last season. So there's not much target competition, again, just to accentuate that point. Christian Kirk was good. He's been with the team for 3 years now. He had 85 targets on 12 games last year and 133 targets in a fully healthy season with his first year with the Jaguars. That's just shy of 8 targets a game next to Calvin Ridley, next to Evan Ingram. And even with Calvin Ridley on the team, he was arguably the better wide receiver. He led the team in total targets per game, first downs per route run, and yards per route run. All that means is that while he's on the field, he's typically getting more work. He's getting the ball more. He's being the first read for Trevor Lawrence as he's going through his progressions. And now the situation this year is better than it was last year, and he's going as a wide receiver 32 in drafts. That's about round 5 or 6. Let's just make it make sense. It's a really good value, and I'm loving this round 5 to 6 range because we have any chance to get a guy like Kyler Murray, Christian Kirk, maybe even Marquise Brown. That's a really good way to start, or I guess finish the middle of your draft. But if you like running backs, a sleeper this year again is going to be Jaylen Warren, and I know a lot of people already are pretty interested in him this year from what we saw in the previous years. But for right now, he technically is underrated for as far as fantasy statistics go. He finished as the RB22 last season, and that was as a part-time running back. And I think that's what I'm just going to call backup running backs in committees now. They're just part-timers. But he managed to be pretty efficient on an offensive line and offense in general that was not that good. And after hearing all of that, you'd have to think, well, the Steelers used their first 2 draft picks on offensive linemen. They brought in Arthur Smith, who is a very run-heavy coach. They clearly want to keep the run game alive and well, but Jaylen Warren's going in the 6th or even 7th round of fantasy football drafts right now. That's an RB34. Make that make sense, please. He has a ton of receiving upside. We've seen that last year, and there's always the chance that Najee Harris does miss some games, which makes him a premium handcuff running back. He has the size to get more of a workload and maybe even a workhorse workload if Najee Harris gets injured, and a lot of the times that is what holds running backs back. If they're the speedy, really lightweight kind of running backs, they can't really get a Derrick Henry level workload because they're just not built for it. It's going to be a lot of wear and tear, and it's going to hurt the team more than if they didn't give them more usage. But Jaylen Warren's 5'8", 215 pounds. That's pretty big, pretty good for a running back. He's going to get volume and not have to worry about it. And I get Justin Fields may be the starting quarterback at some point in the season, and that would hurt his value a little bit more. But he's already going so late in drafts that you're kind of accounting for Justin Fields to be the quarterback already. There's no loss in value. And if you are worried about that, by the time we get closer to the season, that answer will probably be out, and we'll probably know who the starting quarterback is, at least a better idea. And even if he is, if we look at the Chicago Bears last season in the backfield they had with Khalil Herbert, with Donta Foreman even, they still managed to be flex guys every single week in and out. Did I like them very much? No, but they still managed to be startable in a good amount of leagues. Now we have a better situation with Warren being way better than all of those running backs the Bears had combined, maybe even a better offensive line. I'm not going to say it's the best, but it's probably better than the Bears. They have a better offensive scheme with Arthur Smith. We saw how much running he liked to do with the Falcons. But speaking of running backs, if you are really looking for a sleeper that's later in the drafts, Trey Benson is a guy you need to put on your list. The Cardinals drafted him with their 2nd round pick this season in this draft. And there's only 2 running backs that went in the 2nd round or higher, and he was one of them. So the draft capital is there, which does kind of help a little bit and make it feel a little bit better. But then you're going to think, well, Kyler Murray's still the quarterback. He runs a decent amount, and they have James Conner. He's a perfectly fine running back. Why are we taking him in draft? Well, let's look into it. Trey Benson is going as the RB36. That's round 9, maybe even 10 if you're lucky. And we learned last season and all of the seasons before then that having handcuff running backs can really be what sets you apart in winning fantasy football leagues. And this isn't just a throwaway pick like, oh, I'm going to take Derrick Henry's backup, so if he ever gets injured, I'm going to have an RB1. No, he's still going to have value on his own. James Conner is a good running back. I will give you that, but it's also a historical fact for James Conner that he gets injured a lot. On average, he misses just under 4 games a season, 4 out of his last 5 years, and pretty much for his entire NFL career in general, he misses 3 games a season. It's a given. And then you have to account for the games where he's coming back, but he's not at 100%. He's not at a full snap share, so it doesn't really count as him playing a full game. So that gives Trey Benson, or whoever your backup running back would be, even more of a chance to get acclimated and into this offense. And we saw that with the Cardinals last year. We had a couple no-name running backs come into this offense when James Conner was injured and look like prime Barry Sanders. If you guys know, you know. You remember that situation. But outside of injuries and things that we can't control, because I'm not one of those guys that is like, oh, he's going to get injured, so he's a good player. No, he has value outside of that. At Florida, he averaged 6 yards per carry. That's not some pee-wee organization. It's a good school that plays good competition. He also had a top 3 broken tackle total behind David Montgomery and Kenneth Walker. That's a pretty good comparison and group of guys to be with. But all of that is just to say he got drafted to be used this year. They're already saying that he's NFL ready. He's 215 pounds in the 98th percentile of speed. He's actually pretty good at pass blocking, which is always a plus for running backs. The Cardinals did add some receivers and offensive linemen over the offseason, which is just going to make this run game even more liquid, and it's going to be a lot better when you don't have to stack the box against running backs and you have no wide receiver weapons. And that's pretty much exactly what you're looking for in later round picks at the running back position. He still has value before injury, and after injury, he's quite literally a league winner. Statistically, you have the best return on investment when you draft running backs in the 7th round or later, outside of your like top 1 or 2 rounds of picking running backs. But that dead zone in the middle usually isn't great. But let's say you already have enough running backs you like on your list. You don't need to get any more. You need some other positions to round out your team and the list of guys that you're looking for this season in drafts. I am loving Dalton Kincaid. Put this tight end on every list you got. And off the jump, it's pretty obvious. The Bills lost Stephon Diggs. They lost Gabe Davis. There's a lot of open targets to go somewhere. They replaced them with Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel. A big downgrade if you want to say that. And we have to remember that this guy, Dalton Kincaid, was the Bills' first round pick a couple seasons. I guess you could call it like last season ago. So the draft capital is there, and he was drafted to be used. Like, he's going to get more volume and more work and more snaps as the seasons go on. And some people do still have worries about Dawson Knox. I did last season, which is why I wasn't too high on Kincaid when Knox was healthy last season, because it was his first season. He's still a rookie. But in week 7 through 10, when Dawson Knox was injured and not on the field, he doubled his targets, his pretty much every single number, his targets, receptions, yards, and he averaged 15 fantasy points a game. That is very good for a tight end, especially one that's filling in. And that helped him finish as the tight end 14 on the year. And if you've been around this page for long enough, you know why that's very impressive. A lot of rookie tight ends have a little bit longer to get acclimated because they have to play offensive line, essentially, learn how to block, and then they also got to play receiver and learn how to run routes and do all that. It's pretty tough. And he showed promise in his limited snaps all season long, so I really do love taking him at a 5th round ADP. But I really am loving tight ends this season, and again, I can put together a full tight end video if you guys do want to see that. But I like leaving my drafts by round 6 with a tight end, and if I don't have one by then, I'm waiting to the very end of the draft where I can get a guy like Luke Musgrave, Taysom Hill, and just ride the waivers for the rest of the season. But speaking of tight ends, another guy I absolutely love, if you don't want to get him, is Jake Ferguson, and I'm sure you've heard about him. If you haven't, I'll make it quick. He's going as a tight end 10 in the 8th round of fantasy football drafts. This is where I like getting him. I like that pick. That is a very good ADP. And the difference between the tight end 2 or 3 to the tight end 10 is only a couple fantasy points. It's really not that big of a difference, so it's okay to wait. So the sleeper tight ends like Jake Ferguson are really what gives you the most value. We saw that happen with Sam Laporta and kind of Dalton Kincaid last season. They stole a lot of the tight end hype, and Jake Ferguson just went under the radar. Nobody really paid attention to him. But there's really nowhere else to go but up for him, because he finished as the tight end 48 when Dalton Schultz was still on the team, and then last season he jumped up to the tight end 9. Dak loves targeting his tight ends. He's a touchdown merchant. If any of you guys watched last season's games, you know every time he touches the ball, it's gonna be in the red zone. Even if he's double coverage, he gets red zone targets. And he's clearly the number 2 option behind CeeDee Lamb. There really isn't that much on the team outside of him to compete, and Dak Prescott's gonna throw the ball a lot. We've seen it. It's just gonna happen. So when you're a tight end on this good of an offense with not the most target competition going in the 8th round, let's take him and just not think about it. And I gotta give you a player that I like for every single position. We have to go with the quarterback. Anthony Richardson is still a guy I'm liking this year, and I know there's a lot of caution tape around that name, especially with all of the injuries and everything that happened last season. He's still going as the quarterback 8 this year. That might be pretty early for some people considering all of his history, and I promise you that ADP will go up. The only reason he's this low is because it's early in the season. There's not that much hype building up about him. He's got a bunch of injuries, and it does kind of suck that he did have those, because that's the only reason he's going as the quarterback 8 and not anything higher. Had surgery on his shoulder. It took him out for all of the season. He had a concussion last year. He only played 4 games, and the really bad part about that, and I feel bad saying it out loud, is that he only finished 2. But on a brighter note, he averaged 48 yards a game in those healthy games, and he finished as the quarterback 5 on average in those 4 games that he did play healthy. Those numbers are pretty good for a rookie. Again, this rushing upside is keeping his floor higher with guys like Jaden Daniels, even Lamar Jackson, and Kyler Murray. These guys have a higher floor and are being drafted a little bit early because they have that rushing upside that'll keep them with a higher fantasy point number. There really isn't that much to say about him. He did have a smaller sample size of games last season. He was a rookie. There's not many numbers to look at. But what really makes me not worry about his injury history is that he has a long offseason to recover, and he's got Shane Steichen as the coach now. He helped coach Jalen Hurts. He brought the Eagles to a playoff berth last season, and almost more than that with Gardner Minshew. And he still has pretty decent weapons. He's got Jonathan Taylor, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, and Michael Pittman as the wide receiver 1. It's not like he's on a trash team with bad coaches. I guarantee you if he does stay healthy for even 15 of the games this season, he will finish as a top 5 quarterback. That rushing upside is legit. I would take him. He is going to climb up in fantasy drafts, and we're going to revisit that later. But for now, he's a great pick. But going back to the running backs, because everybody loves running backs, nobody can get enough of them, is Ty Chandler, and this is a true league winner. It might sound disgusting, like why are we drafting him? But if we look at last season, he was doing pretty good, and I'll get into that. So let's refresh your mind. Last season, he averaged 5 yards per carry. That was behind Cam Akers, behind Alexander Mattison. Then Cam Akers got hurt and was out for the season, and Alexander Mattison really struggled to fill in for him and was not doing that great, which gave Ty Chandler an opportunity, and he absolutely excelled with all of the time on field he was getting. But wait, then they went out and signed Aaron Jones over the offseason and kind of killed all of our hope for Ty Chandler. He's a great running back. Is he amazing? No, but he's definitely better than what they had before. But if we're looking at it from a pure numbers perspective, Aaron Jones is not going to be a workhorse running back. No amount of reports or anything from the team is saying that he will be. He did split carries in Green Bay as well. And if we look at the fantasy statistics from ADPs and what the fantasy drafts are looking like so far, Aaron Jones is going as the RB18. That's in round 4 or 5. That's pretty understandable. I wouldn't really change that ADP. I think it's about average, about what it should be at. But then you look at Ty Chandler, he's going as the RB46 going in round 12. That is a ginormous jump for probably what's going to be a split backfield. Aaron Jones is going into his age 30 season. If we know anything about fantasy football these days, everybody's obsessed with ages and their biological clock of when their prime ends and starts. It is pretty old for a running back in the NFL. I doubt they're going to give him and shovel him all the targets in the league. They have Ty Chandler for a reason, and he does have a lengthy injury history. I find it hard to believe that he's going to play the entirety of the season. Again, this isn't one of those situations where we're only drafting Ty Chandler if Aaron Jones or the starting running back gets injured because he's going to be a league winner. That is pretty much what's happening, but he's going to be in a split backfield and have value with Aaron Jones there as well. He's not going to finish as a top 10 running back, but again, we're taking him in round 12. There really isn't much of a loss you're taking. Round 12 is a throw up to anybody. You can take backup quarterbacks, kickers even, but a wide receiver that will make that difference and is going to finish as a way better wide receiver than his ADP depicts, like Ty Chandler, but for the wide receiver position, is Khalil Shikir. Yes, the Bills lost Stephon Diggs, they lost Gabe Davis, and they have Dalton Kincaid still on the team, but they replaced him with some pretty bad wide receivers in Curtis Samuel, Brian Thomas. They're not bad. I guess it's kind of mean to say that, but they're definitely not Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis levels. But Shakir is still hiding in the shadows. Last season, every time a wide receiver would get injured, he'd step up and do amazing. But now Curtis Samuel is really his only target competition. I would assume Dalton Kincaid is going to be that number 1 option, so the wide receiver room is completely open. Last year, Shakir had 40 receptions with 611 yards to go on top of that. And keep in mind, that's all behind Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, all of the other wide receiver options they have. But what really makes him a good pick is that when the Bills changed their offensive coordinator, they started using more 3 wide receiver sets. And when that happened, we saw Khalil Shakir's snap percentage go from 15 to 70, almost 80% for the rest of that season, ever since Stephon Diggs started doing bad, essentially. And then by week 8, he was putting up 15 fantasy points a game on half of the games that he played. He's got the individual talent, he's a good downfield guy, and after all, he has Josh Allen throwing him the ball, so it doesn't really get much better than that. And all of this to say that we're taking this guy in round 11. Like, this is a potential, I'm not going to call him a wide receiver 1 because that's pretty egregious to say that, but a wide receiver 2 at the very least. And there's really nobody in the way of him getting that wide receiver 1 spot for the Bills. It's a great pick, round 11. There's no cost that comes with it. And I'm also interested in Lad McKonkey. If you guys have seen any of the previous videos, you know who he is by now. I promise you, by the time the season gets closer, you're going to hear his name all over the place. And he's in that situation where he very well could be the wide receiver 1 for the Chargers. They just drafted him. If we know anything about the Chargers, they lost Keenan Allen, they lost Mike Williams, they lost Austin Eckler, who was getting a very good amount of targets out of the backfield. Yes, they replaced him with Gus Edwards. He's not going to get the same amount of target share that Austin Eckler did. They just don't have target competition. His only competition is Quentin Johnston, DJ Chark, and Josh Reynolds. That is not good. And he also has Justin Herbert throwing him the ball. I know he's had some losing seasons. He's been injured. He hasn't been great, but he's still a very good quarterback and can throw the ball. He's going in the 9th round, even 10th of drafts. Just take him. There's really no L when you take him that low. He's very well easily going to outperform that ADP. That is going to finish off this video of the top sleepers that we need to be writing down on our list for fantasy football when the season gets closer. I absolutely appreciate you guys watching this video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. I assume all of you are if you've watched this far. I'll see you guys in the next videos. Winning fantasy football leagues coming soon.